All righty. Welcome back, everybody. We are back for another new to Lifecycle Insights, the 4-week workshop that we run for all of our new partners as they come on board. We're picking this up in the middle of week 3, so we've already done the basic data cleanup stuff that starts in week 1. We've done building a budget, which is week 2, and this week we're going to drill into all about assessments. So we're going to kind of talk through what is almost a standalone component in the tool, or at least could function kind of as a standalone component in the tool. We have a lot of data collection components. So your asset list, your user list, the budget forecast, the contracts list. These are all things that we're just collecting data from different sources, putting it together and putting it in a fashion you can present it to your client. The piece that I say is a little less, and it's very data-based, it's very data-driven, but it's less clear and plain to your customer is assessments. And what we do with assessments is really try and build out and identify the status quo for a customer. Where are they today? Where are their gaps? Where are they not aligned with best practices? Where are they not aligned with our product stack and supportability? And we'll talk about supportability and best practices, and those are two totally different things. And I want you guys to think about it from that perspective. A best practice is CIS and NIST saying everyone should have multi-factor authentication everywhere. A supportability issue is, well, they have an IPS IDS capable firewall and it could be configured, but it's a brand that I don't really know and understand. So it's going to be hard for me to support that customer. And those are two different kinds of things, depending on your assessment template. And for a general MSP assessment, that probably should still be included. So we'll talk about those things. We'll talk about how all that works. We'll kind of step into those bits and pieces. Before we dive into all of that, we're going to go just have a quick reminder of the UI. So you'll find everything over here under company reports, everything in that section honors the client picker. So when I change the client picker, I get data from different clients throughout the tool. When I go down under MSP reports, we'll see that there are some places where we can see data across all of our clients, the Microsoft 365 report, asset ad hoc, all clients roadmap recommendations. And then you'll see the administrative section. So today we're going to live up in the assessment section that is under company reports. So that really only works for one customer at a time. Although there are a couple of cross-client comparisons up here that we'll point out and show to you. If you have questions along the way, if you feel like we're going too fast or there's something that you missed in one of the earlier episodes, don't hesitate to go down to the help section, type in welcome. That'll bring up the new to Lifecycle Insights article. And if you click this little pop out, it'll spring itself out into a web browser window. You can follow the links to the recordings about any of the previous episodes that we've done. We even have an episode 5 and some bonus content stored out here that you won't get if you show up for the regular calls. So that's kind of how to find your way around. If you have problems, need help along the way, don't hesitate to come down here and do a contact us. Our support is going to be really weird and strange to you guys who have worked with MSP vendors in the past. Support's going to answer everything in 30 or 40 minutes, and then we're going to fix most of your problems same business day. So I know that's weird. I know it's uncomfortable. Try and put up with us while we perform that type of service. I know it's a lot to tolerate. If you have any questions that you can't get figured out by support, or if you need something that is more of an MSP how-to, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or to Mark. I'm going to throw my email out here in the chat. If I don't answer you fast enough, Mark will throw his email in the chat. He's typically faster to get back to folks because he's doing less of this kind of stuff and may be able to get back to you quicker. So, but don't hesitate to reach out. We're always here to help. We're absolutely a transparent company where you can reach out to any of us at any time. As far as assessments go, let's kind of slide down here and dive into the Lifecycle Insights assessment portal. What we're going to talk about from here is the main overlay here. So we've got 6 different tiles. Assessment events is where we go to actually run an assessment, and we'll jump in there in a few minutes. Analytics by customer is where we pick apart an assessment that we've already run and kind of look at it broken out by in different analytical. There's a couple different looks that we use to either summarize or show where our customer's failing, things like that. And we'll talk about those analytics as well. We do have analytics all customers under here, and this is a little counterintuitive to the UI that I just explained to you, where your all customer stuff typically lives down here. But this is one place where we can do some analytics across all your customers, and I'll show you how to use that a little later. Configuration options, these are just some basic setup things. We won't spend a whole lot of time in here. I will tell you, out of the box, the configuration works really well for 95% of MSPs. So don't feel like you got to come in here and tweak a lot of stuff. If you don't see assessment setup, if you don't see these bottom 3 boxes, it's because you have a limited security view, and these have been hidden from you as a non-admin. If I drill into things here that you think you need to do your job, you need to reach out to your administrator and ask them to come add these functionalities to your role. Managing assessment items and managing assessment templates. This is where we build the questions and the things that we're going to go talk to our customers about, the best practices, the products and services, the things that really make up our assessment. So we're going to jump into assessment items first and kind of start there. We're going to show you guys how to build an assessment item, or what an assessment item looks like. If you wanted to add one from zero, you could do that just coming out here and clicking add new. I'm going to drill into an individual one that I've already got built. And I just want to talk through the different components here. So remote access policy, this is the assessment item. This is the question we're answering. And in Lifecycle Insights, you can do this one of 2 ways. My personal preference, and since we built this out of my MSP, you'll see my preference kind of permeated throughout the system, but you can do it both ways. My personal preference is a short, non-descriptive assessment item. So we're going to assess our customer on their remote access policy. This gives me the ability, when I'm answering the assessment, to kind of weave my answer the direction that I need the customer, that I need to apply constructive criticism to the client. So, you know, if they have remote access in use, then I can spell out what may be wrong with it. If they don't have remote access in place at all, we can simply say doesn't apply, it doesn't exist at all. We have a not applicable, we have an unknown, more information needed type answer. We have a acceptable risk answer. Blue in the platform is typically acceptable risk. And then we have a nailed it, customer did the right thing type answer. These are pretty easy. You can always add new responses. When you go to add a response, you need to do 2 things. You need to type in the, when you do it here, you need to do 2 things. You need to type in the actual response that you want to have. So if this is a red answer, then I'm going to say, right? And I'm going to spell out why the client's failing. I'm going to mark this as at risk. So I'm going to show that this is a problem. And then I'm going to click save. And that's going to slide this over here. It's going to mark it in the red category. I'm not going to do, well, I guess I can show you guys how that works, and I'll just delete it back out of here. But this is why we would move one, you know, how we would create a new answer if we needed one. You can also create these on the fly inside the tool as you're working. So you won't spend a ton of time on this particular form view. But what I do want you to note is the next 2 fields down. These next 2 fields are probably the most important where it comes to delegating the answering of your risk assessment questions. So if you're someone who's on this call who ultimately would like to not be the only human in the building smart enough to answer the risk assessment questions, scoring instructions and explanation remediation should help you guys figure out how to delegate this work to someone else. So let's take our firewall example. If we have, you know, we've got a firewall, we're going to score it red, yellow, or green. Red might be totally doesn't work with anything that we, you know, just doesn't perform the function, right? They're plugged straight into their cable modem, or they've got a WRT54G, and we need to get them a modern firewall with modern features. That's going to be our red answer, right? Yellow might be, well, we're a Sonic Wall shop, and this guy has a FortiGate, and it's not that the FortiGate can't do it; it's just hard for me to support it. Or yellow might be, hey, they have our Sonic Wall and it's in a good place, but the warranty or the licensing is about to run out. So we just need to bubble it up to the top, bring some attention to it, get the customer to buy a renewal, and we can move on. And the green answer is they have a Sonic Wall. It's properly configured. Our SOC monitors it. You know, it's in our change management tools, and LionGuard throws off an alert when something happens on it. And, you know, we've got it totally dialed in, and it's as we expect it to be. So those are the kind of the summary of answers. Our scoring instructions is going to spell out how would a tier 1 engineer determine whether this is red, yellow, or green. So we're going to give them a document, and if you're a Hoodoo shop or an IT Glue shop, I'd like to see Hoodoo and IT Glue links in here. You don't have to go through and spell it all out here, because you want to move the documentation back where your documentation happens. But this is, how do you log into the firewall and determine if it's the correct device for the customer, if it's properly licensed, if it's properly sized? How do we figure all of that out? And all of that can live in a doc in IT Glue, where the rest of your entire team, not just the folks who use Lifecycle Insights, can access that data. So scoring instructions is the how. How do we determine what is, whether it's red, yellow, or green? And then explanation remediation is, if we're not red, yellow, or once we've determined red, yellow, or green, how do we get from red or yellow to green, right? Red or yellow, what's next? And that what's next might be, from the firewall perspective, if they're all-in managed customer, we just replace the firewall and it's $45 a month on their bill, and they've already signed up for it. We just need to go do it. It may be, if they're a break fix or some kind of a hybrid customer, that we've got to have a sales engineer get involved and size the firewall. We've got to create a quote and send it out to the customer. That there's a whole process that needs to happen. And we want to outline that process there to say, hey, Bob, the tier 1 engineer, it's great that he can identify this isn't a sonic wall, but I don't want him to go out and quote a little bitty sonic wall for a customer who needs a big fat sonic wall, right? We know performance can be a big issue at a firewall if we don't size them correctly. So these are all the things that your tier 2 and tier 3 guys need to think through as you're building this out, and kind of give some direction so that somebody with a lower grade of experience kind of benefits from the experience of the folks who have been around for a long time, right? So that's really what we're going for here. Any questions about any of the fields that we see on the actual assessment item before we jump in further? All right. So from the items, we created a full item bank, and you can see here in my database, I have way too many of them. I have 2,000 assessment items. You'll probably have 100 or 200. We have MSPs with 300 and 400, but you're not going to have this many. Don't worry about it. We can go back from here, and we can jump into manage assessment templates. So assessment templates are literally just that. It's a collection of assessment items put into a certain order so that we can present them to our client and score them. So just because I have 2,000 assessment items in my system doesn't mean that I'm going to use them all. In fact, when you log in with 0, you won't have any assessments above this line. You'll just have this bold text down here, and you'll have the opportunity to import different assessment templates that we have out here as samples. If you don't like our samples, you can build your own. We have an import function. If you don't like our questions, you can customize them. I would strongly encourage it. No two MSPs operate the same. The assessment questions that work well for me and for my MSP, and for the MSP above and below you in the participants list here today, are not going to be the assessment items that work well for your MSP. You're going to need to tweak them to your preferences, your recommendations, your best practices, your products, the things that you do. So we want to make sure that we're doing that before we go out and run this assessment against all of our customers. My recommendation is typically download one of our assessments, right? Go steal one that you want to start with, and then run it against a customer and customize it, right? When you run it against the customer, you'll identify all the things that you don't like. You can see I have dozens and dozens and dozens of templates. I expect you're going to have a small handful, right? And your small handful is going to include probably a compliance assessment or two if you've picked a framework that you guys try and follow. As you work through it, you'll be able to identify from the framework ones. You're not going to change these a lot, right? The frameworks are what the frameworks are. You may want to do like the two that are super popular are the maturity model assessment and the lifecycle default assessment. These two are kind of the big boys. I would say 90% of our customers use one of these two as their starting template and then go customize it. So if you're not sure what to import, take a look at these. You'll simply click import over here, and then you can customize the questions after the fact. The last one I'll point out to you is the pre-sales assessment. Quite often we're running assessments as part of our quarterly business review, as part of our VCIO process, as part of our account management process. Sometimes we're trying to assess a client when we're doing a sales function, right? I need to know where this customer is so I know how much work it's going to take to onboard them to make them a better fit for my organization. The pre-sales assessment is a smaller template. It assumes just things that you can scan with something like Network Detective, that you can see when you walk in the server room, and that you can get answers to from just asking a customer, hey, tell me about your electronic funds transfer policy. Tell me about your data destruction policy. Tell me about your cyber liability insurance. So it's things that you can solve, say, C-scan, one of those three functions. So once we import a template into our system, we'll go take that template. We'll be able to customize it as we get it built out in the system. You can change the name of it. please change the name. All of these names come through on the output that lands in front of your customer. So this should really say the My MSP Technology Alignment Assessment, or the My MSP Assessment, or this just Cybersecurity Risk Assessment, whatever you want to call it. But this should be something, it shouldn't say Lifecycle Insights in it by the time you get done with it. From here, you can customize the questions. You can add new questions in between. So you can add existing items, add items from a template. So if you just wanted to add a yes, no question or a stoplight template, I could come out here and add a stoplight question. It's going to give me the option to add a new thing. I can type out what my at-risk answer is. Right. And this is how we're gonna handle this assessment item. Now, if I click the little postcard here, I'm going to do show properties. This is going to give me those couple of things we were just looking at. So here's how I score it. Okay, so I'm going to fill all of this detail out for my assessment item. This is essentially how we add an assessment item on the fly to an existing assessment. If I wanted to add more answers, I could add an answer here and go with a not applicable and say, right. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. The minute that I click save, it'll add this to my list. I have 2,068 assessment items, so I'm not going to add this one to my list. I'm going to save us a little bit of cleanup on the way out. But does anybody have questions about adding a question to an existing assessment item? So this is the use case where you import my assessment and then you say, oh my God, Alex doesn't use this product or service that I fully believe every client must have. I got to add that as an assessment item. Is everybody comfortable with that? Does everybody still have a pulse?
Yeah.
Good deal. Ryan's awake. All right. So there we go. So I'm going to delete that one out of there, but I do want to show you one more thing while we're in here. Once you've imported an assessment, you can't do this on the templates, the ones down below, but once you've imported it and can customize it, you can also jump into layout view. And layout view lets you say, hey, Alex was crazy when he built all this out, and I don't think it should be in this order. In fact, I would like a new category, and I'm just gonna change everything up on how this gets built, right? So you can drag things around, you can move things. This literally lets me, move things around, reorder entire categories, reorder items, move things around to the point where they're in the logical order that you want to answer them in. We have some folks who have technical questions in technical categories, so they can assign an engineer to go out and answer the technical questions. They have account management type questions, policies, procedures, the other things that an account manager would know in a separate category, so they can literally just assign categories and send two people to fill out the same risk assessment. Think through how this is going to work in your business operations as you build these out. But you can change up the categories all you want and add and remove items from them, etc. Once you're done, you save changes and it will run you right back to the assessment screen. I'm not going to save my changes. We're just going to jump back here. So once I have my items and my templates, I can jump into assessment events. You can see that I've run a ton of them here in my environment, but I'm going to add a fresh one so you guys can see what it looks like. And we're going to go down here and we're going to grab the Lifecycle Insights default assessment. And we're going to create this as a baseline because we're going to pretend this is the first one we've ever done for this customer. And I actually was supposed to start this yesterday. So I'm going to go ahead and flag it as yesterday. There is a caveat in the system. Try not to have two assessments have the exact same assessment date. I moved that one to yesterday for a reason, and I'll show it to you here in just a minute. So you can see one thing that we haven't really talked about yet. You can see tags across the top of my assessment items. This is a brand new function, brand new feature in the tool. We only released it a week or so ago, so you guys are seeing something cool and new. I can come out here and add a tag. If I wanted to add more tags to this item, I could, or I can remove a tag as simply as just clicking them off of there. But what tags give me the ability to do is a really cool sort and filter. So as I get into a brand new assessment, I'm getting ready to fill all this out for my customer. I know my job is only to answer maybe the non-technical questions. I can come in here and filter by tag. I can come down here and grab non-technical, save. And now I am only being asked to answer the non-technical questions. If I come back and somebody marked this non-technical and technical, so maybe everybody gets to answer that question. But if I wanted to come back and say, hey, you know what, actually, I'm going to answer the technical questions, I can filter that again, and that'll spin it around the other way. This is a pretty long assessment. It's got a lot of questions on it, but you can see how tags are super useful. The tag will follow you through the assessment screen here as long as you see this green bar across the top. So anytime you see tag selected, this tells me I'm getting a filtered view of what I should be looking at. And the only way to clear that is to come up here and clear out the tags. So as I'm answering my assessment items, I'm going to come in and say, hey, are we doing an asset inventory for this customer? Yep, they're in a good place. Power management, perfect. Oh, they still have some Windows 7. I'm going to flag them on that. They still have a Server 2008 box. I'm going to flag them on that. Storage is good. Life is good. Primary data storage is on site and sufficient. That's okay. Spare device inventory. We have a couple of spares, but not enough. Our switches are getting older. Our UTM's in a good place. Wi-Fi is good. Dark web monitoring, we're not doing. We have great directory services. Email filtering, we don't have any. Endpoint security software. What the heck? We don't have any of that either. How crazy is that? And our firewalls are set. Workstation server encryption is not good because we still have some old crappy boxes around. Notice once I check on an assessment item, I get the opportunity to create a PSA ticket. If you use Autotask or ConnectWise Manage, you're going to be able to create PSA tickets the moment that you mark an item red, yellow, or green. The reason being that there may be something as you run your risk assessment that you sit down with the customer and say, hey, you know what, or that you don't need to sit down with the customer, right? Some things I mark them red. We're not doing vendor risk management. I have to go get the customer involved to make that happen, right? Checking a checkbox in a firewall or just configuring something quickly for my client that isn't going to be business interrupting, I might just create a PSA ticket and have that work go get done. Have somebody go out and knock that out really quick so that I don't have to do it again for this customer. So I don't have to, you know, show them a red on an assessment for something that they thought I was doing the whole time. So once you've marked something, you can always create that PSA ticket. It'll pop up a little window. In ConnectWise, you pick the service board status and type and subtype. In Autotask, I know those selections are a little different. You'll have to forgive me. I'm not an Autotask guy, so I'm a little rough around the edges there, but you'll just see a slightly different pop-up that you fill in when you click save. It'll shove a ticket off to your system. If I wanted to show you guys what that looked like, it would look like this. Whoops, no, that needs to be a new ticket. It is here we go. And when I save this, you'll notice that once it gets pushed over by the API, now we get the status of the ticket. This updates every night when we do our nightly maintenance. It'll sync from ConnectWise and we'll change the status of the ticket once the work has been done. Any questions so far about scoring an assessment? And I scrolled through and scored a whole bunch of this assessment just to give you guys some samples. I did not go into a whole lot of detail, but I want to show you a few more things before we go too far.
I just
I
have
do have a
one.
quick question.
Yeah.
Can you exclude an entire section for a client or for assessment for a client?
Say that again. Can I do what with an entire assessment or section?
Can you exclude an entire section?
Yeah,
saw
if you
somewhere
don't
where you
answer
could put
a section, it just won't show up as it won't count against them in the scoring.
Okay, all right, perfect. Yeah, because that was part of it. So currently we're having struggles where we've got some clients on prem server, some are in Azure, some are Swiss. A lot of the entire section is not applicable. If we don't score it at all, then it won't.
If you don't score it at all, it
to
won't
it.
include it in either side of the scoring. So if you notice the way we do scoring, it's points scored out of
Yep.
points possible. If there's nothing scored at all, those points are not possible. So they don't come against the entire score at all. And what you also have the ability here to say, show me only the unanswered things. So if you had to come back and answer some of that, we can filter on that. But you can also do show only answered. That'll give you a little bit of flexibility there. You might also find a creative way to use tags around that thought process. To be able to filter out some of the stuff that you don't need to see. Although tags go across all clients. Yeah, there might be some creative uses of tags there. If you get stuck on it, shoot me an email and we'll kick it around. There was another question. I thought.
Yeah, you may have already have gone over this, but we have a standard template that we've used with different products. So I was looking at it, and it says that you can add and you can import based
Oh
on
crap! You know what?
CSV.
I meant to show you guys that. I will run to that here in just 2 minutes.
Oh, awesome, awesome.
I
Thanks.
actually meant to show it and I missed it. So that was a perfect question. So before I run away from this screen, I want to show you guys scoring instructions and explanation remediation. So they hang out down here. If they're filled out, you will see them. If these two buttons are missing, if these two hyperlinks are missing, it means nobody's filled out those sections. So scoring instructions, documentation on how to score. If it's not green, then what do we do about it? And those are the things that you're going to want to, and you can see here, explanation remediation exists. There are no scoring instructions filled out for this one. So nobody bothered to fill that one in. It does not exist. Out of the box, most of our templates will not have these. You'll need to go customize those to your organization because you're going to answer each question differently based on your tool stack. You can add public comments anywhere you mark something red or yellow. You should add a public comment. So down here, I'm going to come down here and add a public comment. And I'm going to state that Windows 7 needs to be retired. And I'm also going to do the same thing under servers. I'm going to add a public comment that says Windows Server 2008 needs to be retired, right? So now we know we can put that in front of our customer. And I can also add a comment here. Right. And this is where we add internal comments that we may not want the client to see. A lot of MSPs have an engineer going out and doing the first pass, and then the account manager coming back and taking a second look at it because they're the one who has to present it. This is where your engineer can communicate with your account manager right down here in private comments. So just know that that exists. You can also do show previous responses. If we want to see how this has been answered in the past, we can see this client's had this problem for a long time. We can also see the comments that have been used in the past if I wanted to steal the same public comment and reuse it, etc. And then again, last thing, if I wanted to add a response on the fly out here, I could come down here and say, hey, you know what? I need a different answer for this. I marked it red because it was end of life, but what I really want to mark it red for is at risk. Right. So we've got some funky white box server that probably never had a warranty. This is a problem. Right. I'm only going to show this on this assessment because this is an answer I'm probably not going to use for another client, but I could say show it on this, you only use it for this customer, or show it globally for everyone. If you come across something and you go, oh man, I'm sure we're going to see this problem again, you can mark it global and it'll show up as a reusable answer. So I can go ahead and add that response. And now that is one of my answers up here, and I can go ahead and select it and use it for that item. So in the sake of not forgetting to go back and show you guys templates proper, we're going to take a break from where we're at, but we just scored this assessment. We're going to take a break from this. We're going to run back over to manage assessment templates and point out you can do an import from CSV right here. If you do an import from CSV, you just click here, download the file, download the sample CSV template. It'll pull down the CSV with everything in it that you need to fill out. And then we can choose the file to upload. We can go grab that CSV from our downloads. Pay no attention to my marketing material. There is a CSV that I can import. When I load the columns, it'll just let me say, oh, here is the assessment name. Here's the assessment category. The beauty of it is if you use our CSV, you're always going to get all those categories in the same place. So when I go to at-risk response, it's always going to be my at-risk response. If you do your own, you're going to have to map these a little funky. So typically it's easiest and best if you just take what you had in your other template, cram it into our Excel sheet, and then bring it in. If you have problems importing this, and it is a little finicky from time to time, just reach out to support. Click help here, send over the CSV you're working on, click contact us, attach the doc, and we'll help you get through it. It's really, there's some weird little caveats that folks get stuck on, and our support team can rip through them pretty quickly to get this stuff added in there for you. Everybody good with that? Does that answer all the questions on it? So we've done an assessment, and now we want to duplicate it. We want to do a comparison, right? I did my 1018 assessment. I'm going to go meet with this customer in December, and I've got to show them their December assessment. So what I did was click copy add comparison event. I'm going to bring over my previous comments. or previous responses. I'm also going to bring over my previous comments. I'm going to call this a comparison assessment, but this might be a quarterly assessment. Actually, we'll call it my quarterly assessment. And we're going to go out and do this in December. Okay. As soon as I click add here, it's going to just duplicate everything that I had already done for the customer and drag me right into the assessment where I can go ahead and score it. It's going to show me what my last answer was. So let's say I changed the answer 2 or 3 times. I can still remember how I scored it last. It's going to give me the ability now to just go down and change answers that I had from previous, and hopefully my client's moving in a better direction, right? Let's say they replaced those Windows 7 machines. Let's say they solve for the server problem. And we'll go find a couple other things that they could have solved for here. I'm just going to pick some random ones so that you guys can see how this works. And I'm going to do them upside down on backup to cloud services here, just so you guys can see how that works. So now that I've rescored the new assessment, I might want to compare it to a previous one. I can do that up here. So up here, we see the form view. This is how we fill in the assessment. The comparison option lets me see my current assessment versus the most recent one just like it. If I wanted to go change it and compare it to one that I had done months or years ago, I could do that. I can choose what's in column 1 or column 2. I can just grab a different assessment event. You always have to compare against an assessment event on the same template. I can do a summary if I wanted to put it out in front of my customer, but not give them all the details. You can see here, this is what happens to categories where you don't score anything. Sorry, this category does have scoring. These categories have no scoring. You can see here, no points possible, no points awarded. And then you can also do, we can also see item detail and the summary from here. So here, my summary lets me see by category how I did with this customer. I only scored 4 categories. So this is that example where I don't want to show them an entire category. That category is just going to be missing from this summary section. And then item detail, you'll see the reds and the yellows. We're going to hide the greens, and we're going to hide the unknowns and things that we didn't fill in, etc. So you're not going to see any of that here. I want to include public comments. So if I had included public comments, if I had made public comments, we would see them over here. I think that I marked all of the things that I put comments on back to red, back to green. So here, if I go to item detail, we should see a couple. Yeah. So here's those public comments that I made. This is where those come through. When we print this out and send it out to the customer, this really becomes our remediation plan for the next 6 to 12 months. The stuff that's wrong today becomes, in order of color, the things that we have to worry about. I'm going to continue to remind my customer of things that I recommended they fix, that they said, I'm cheap and I'm not going to pay for that. So don't stop talking to me about it. I'm going to continue to mark those as acceptable risks so the client knows, hey, we've been talking about this, but you've decided not to do it. And I'm probably going to put a comment in here that against our recommendation, the client has opted not to spend this money, right? And I'm going to make sure that I point out that it's about money, not about my recommendations. Any questions about how to use the picker up here and what you can get out of these different reports? To some extent, you just have to play with them and go out and look at these, play with the reports. This guy moved backwards. He's down 18% since the last time we worked with him. All right. So that's a big chunk of assessments. We're going to talk about the analytics really quickly, and then we'll open it up for the rest of your questions and kind of take a deeper look. So analytics, you really need to pick all of the one or all of the assessments of a certain type. So here's the one we were just working on. Here's the assessment type we were just working on. And here is how my customer has done over time with this assessment. So here's the Lifecycle Insights default assessment. The first time they took this assessment, they got a 68. They got a little better, then they got a whole lot worse. Now we've bounced around a little bit. Hopefully your clients are going to look like this, right? Where they started poorly and they've improved over time. And in a demo environment, that doesn't always hold true, but in your environments, typically what you're going to see is on the baseline, they don't do real well. As we work them down the assessment, they do better and better. You can see where this assessment only has a couple of, there are fewer assessments with the policy and procedure category filled in than there are with the top categories filled in. So if we're skipping a category for a certain quarter or over a certain time, that's okay. We'll account for a lot of that. but you'll definitely see some places where, you know, on 10/16, we filled in everything, right? We filled in the entire assessment template, but on some of these other dates, like 10/18 and 12/15, we didn't fill in most of the assessment. So a lot of this hasn't been done. The next thing to look at is item detail exposure. This is a function that really has been moved back into the assessment. You might not use this quite as much, but this is going to show you where things are broken out, how they were scored. If we look at the items here, we can see the last time that this was marked in this way. And then we can do link to recommendation. This function is almost obsolete over here. It's a lot of clicks for you to get through to here, but what you can do from here is select a couple of items and create a recommendation from here. We'll spend all week next week talking about recommendations, so I'm not going to get into it a lot, but what I am going to show you real quick is that if you look inside of an assessment event, we've moved that functionality or duplicated that functionality right here, and it's way easier just to knock it out right from this item detail section. So right from here, I can say, let's go make a recommendation to solve these problems, and I can do it without having to go 6 clicks deep into that other section of the platform. And then last but not least, analytics across all customers. Why would I care? So I want to take my favorite assessment, the one that I think I've run against every one of my customers, and I want to go see how each client looks compared to each other. When I do analytics across all customers, what I wind up with is a scenario where it takes the most recent run of every assessment across each client. So you can see here, I've run this assessment template across these customers. Now I like to look at it this way: my clients down the side and my assessment items across the top. So you can swap rows and columns. But what I'm looking for here is patterns, really. Are there products and services that I'm really great at selling? BDR, almost all my clients have it. In fact, security audits, all my customers have done some kind of a security audit. Most of them are taking my VCIO consulting services. I suck at convincing customers that we have to do something about a mobile device policy. They just aren't doing it. And this is where I can learn that maybe in my business, it makes sense for me to pick a quarter and focus on why all my clients believe redundant internet is an acceptable risk and they don't need to buy it. Maybe I'm trying to sell something that I don't believe in either. At my MSP, I didn't really believe in redundant internet. Our internet providers were reliable enough that for most of my customers, it was a throwaway. I put it in there so that I had an excuse to explain the concept of an acceptable risk to a customer. And then when they pushed back on something else, I could say, look, I understand why you don't want to do redundant internet. It's money I probably wouldn't spend either. But when you get to talking about whether or not to back up your cloud services, I'm really going to have to push back on this and say, you're going to be really mad at me if something goes wrong with those cloud services. And we should probably dig into this and have a different conversation. So sometimes you're giving those away. Sometimes there's a freebie reason behind it. But sometimes you've just got something like mobile device policy where you've got to sit down and look internally and say, what do we need to work on? I can also look at this from an overall performance perspective. If I look at it this way, it's nice for me to be able to sit down with a customer and say, hey, you're my worst performing customer on the security risk assessment. You take less care for security than any other customer I have. That's a problem to me. Is it a problem to you? Notice that I said you should always give the client 2 different dates on their assessments. If you run the same assessment twice on the same day, you'll get behavior like this. And then this report will get a little tainted. So that's what causes this. And that's why I specifically don't run the same assessment twice on the same day. But if you ever see this, that's what causes it. Because we're just we don't do a timestamp on the assessment. But this will show you which is your favorite customer probably, or at least which is the customer that takes the most of your advice and which is the customer that you struggle with the most. We can actually break that down by category. So creative designs scored a 4 in business application software. They're carrying around a lot of old antiquated business software and they score very poorly on it. They score pretty well when we get into some of these other categories. Well, they scored a 0 here, so maybe they're not doing so hot. But there are places where they've scored really, really well. So it just depends. We can look across clients, we can look across categories. Maybe we can see some trends here as well. Maybe all of my clients are doing poorly on regulatory. There's only one client in the 80s on policy and procedure. So maybe we can see here and identify things that we want to improve in our client base. And that's kind of what these are designed for, so that leadership can look at it. Excuse me. So that leadership can look at it from a top level down and say, these are the places where we're really knocking it out of the park. And these are places where we might need some internal training, some internal focus, but to improve the output for everybody involved. So that's analytics across all customers. Anybody got questions about either one of those analytics categories before we stop the recording and kind of jump into what's next? All right. Lots of quietness there. So just want to make sure we've addressed everything. I think we really have. Yep. I think we've really covered just about everything. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, give everybody an opportunity to have some conversations that they might not want to have on a live recording.